Am I audible? Am I visible as well or not? I like to make it on. From my side, it's on. I'm sorry for that. So better I should say go to the. Sorry. I don't know how to make it on. It is not working. If somebody can help me, then I can take care. Otherwise, I just. I can just go to the screen and sharing screen. You may help me if it is shared or not. जी जी बिल्कुल I'm trying again. Enter your screen, share. I'm trying, but it is some problem. I can ask my computer person to help me out. There is some problem. इसको सोनम को बुलाओ. Just give me 1 minute, please. I have shared my screen, but I don't know. It is not visible. So there must be some technical issue. सोनम ये इसमें स्क्रीन शेयर नहीं कर रहा है. पीपीटी देख सकते हो ना आप? Hello. Hello. Give me 2 minutes because there is some technical problem. I am rejoining. Hello. हाँ जी, मेरे यहाँ ऑडियो वीडियो दोनों चालू बता रहा है, क्या वहां से कोई म्यूटेड है? हाँ, मेरा कैमरा और ऑडियो वीडियो दोनों चालू है। मेरे को नहीं बता रहा है कोई दिक्कत यहाँ से। अब स्क्रीन शेयर कर रहा हूँ तो मेरे यहाँ से एंटर टू योर स्क्रीन कर रहा हूँ, ये जा रहा है स्क्रीन पे। ये शेयर कर रहा हूँ तो शेयर कर रहा है। अब शेयर करके भी ये आ रहा है। अच्छा, ठीक है। स्क्रीन दिख रहा है? टाइटल्स नजर आ रहा है इसका? क्या है? सो दिस इज environmental challenges and work in India. Hello. Hello. Is this screen is visible? Please let me know. I hope it is visible, so I'll just move on to the next slide. Okay, thank you so much. So I'm sorry for this inconvenience, and I'm thankful to Government RR College for inviting me and for giving me this opportunity to interact with all the young scholars and students working in the various fields. So, as we are listening since last 2 days, that how environmental challenges and environmental pollution and environmental contaminations are affecting our life, and what are the various common mode of environment pollution is air, water, soil, and whatnot. So there are various anthropological reasons, climate change, so many factors. And at very minute level, these things and these issues are entering in our ecosystem, in our body, in our environment. And how this process happens, that is going to be the main issue to understood. That how we can coping such disasters, how we can deal with the such environmental issues related to the environmental pollutions and our health. So at the center, the main core thing is the environmental challenges and human health, which go behind in nutshell. And for that, we are making a lot more effort. Government is making laws, they're making some testing labs, and some researchers, some academicians are doing their toxicological works in their lab, in their institutions. But as an academician, this is also very important to share these things with the young scholars and young people to interact with them, and they must understand their local scenario and they can come out with some environmental remedies in their own areas and countries. So, as we all know, there are so many environmental pollution factors, including the carbon emission and industrialization and development and greenhouse gases, this and that. And before me, there was a very nice presentation by senior academician, and he very rightly said that US is the highest greenhouse gas producer, and they are advising us the most. So, for that matter, the Asian countries, the African countries, the South American countries, their traditional practices are much, much powerful compared to the modern techniques to cope with any of the disasters. For example, if we all recall 2 years before, 3 years before, what was the situation during COVID? The whole world was under threat, including US, which is much else. The Western countries, the European countries, they suffered a lot. Their death rate is quite high. So compared to that, most of the Asian countries, and especially in India and in Thar Desert, our death is the lowest. And our recovery rate is yes. What was the reason? The only reason our traditional practice of environmental conservation and natural resource management that helps us, and that sustained our livestock industry, our biodiversity, and that biodiversity gives us a nutrient value in food supply, nutrient, and they maintained our immunity. And that's the reason we are here to talk with each other. There are many people who sacrificed their life. Many of our relatives, friends, they lost their life because of this COVID. So these environmental pollutions, these environmental challenges sometimes become a blast. It becomes havoc, whether it is man-made, whether it is natural, whether it is climate change, and that affects the human life. We are here to come out with some understanding that what kind of threats and what are the ways and process of these threats coming to our life and coming to our ecosystem. So as we talk, there are so many. In general, if we talk about environmental pollution, simply air pollution, air pollution, soil pollution, Am I audible? Am I audible? Okay. Is this slide is visible? Okay. So as we talked about the various type of pollutions, I'll just go briefly. When we talk about the pollution, we talk about the air pollution, water pollution, and soil pollution. These are the major contamination comes in our visuals. But there are so many contaminations which come in various living creatures with the various modes. And that includes life in air. How this title of the conference was that life in air is in danger. Life in sea was also equally in threat. Life on surface definitely exposed to the various environmental threats. So if we talk about life in air, then there are some exemplary species, exemplary work on avian fauna by US, by Asian countries, by European countries. And there is a very peculiar example of vulture population decline in India. So understand that life in air comes in danger to the environmental threats due to the pollutions that we are going to understand in the coming slides. So as we see, the most of the vultures are distributed along with the perennial source of water. And for that matter, not only vulture, the human life exists along the water sources. Ancient time, the Sindhu Gati Sabhyata we talk, and that is also along with the Sindhu Nadi. So most of the civilization were survived, exist along with the water, as good as the biodiversity and vulture species are also surviving along with the river sides. So that need to be understood that how life is existing on the earth. And we have surveyed for the vultures Rajasthan, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Uttaranchal, Himachal Pradesh, and partly Assam, Arunachal, and Meghalaya. And we made a huge survey, population count, nesting technology, and so on. So altogether 9 species long-billed vulture, sailed vulture, white-backed vulture, red-headed vulture, and Egyptian. Out of these species, long-billed and slender-billed and white-rump were conserved by the Wildlife Act 1972, and they have been kept in Schedule 1. Whereas these 4 species are migratory: Himalayan griffon, Eurasian griffon, cinereous vulture, and bearded vulture. They come from Himalaya, from China, from Tibet, from Afghanistan, from Spain, and they come all along the Indian plains in central India during the winter season. The migration started in October and they long last here till March end. So as we talked about, this is a unique picture of all 6 species together. You can see white rump vulture, long-billed vulture, Egyptian vulture. These 3 are the resident vulture species. Whereas Himalayan griffon, Eurasian griffon, and cinereous vulture, these 3 are the migratory vulture species. They visit this part of country, especially the central and western part of India, and especially the large dumping yards where they get dead carcasses month over, and they can feed and sustain and survive here, and they go back and they breed in their own natural breeding areas in the Himalayas. Similarly, the king vulture, it is usually seen in isolation because they always feed on the fresh carcasses. They never observed feeding on the rotten carcasses. Bearded vulture, not visited central part, they always in the Himalayas, they always in the northern part of the country. So the vulture population observed in different part of Rajasthan, we have seen throughout the desert, throughout the Aravalli, throughout Vindhya, throughout the Satpura, throughout the Chambal Basin. And there are various breeding sites, roosting sites, and feeding sites were recorded. And mostly wherever the carnivore population exists in and around vultures, especially the tigers, leopard, wolf, jackals, hyena, etc. And major herbivores observed in and around vulture species are the blackbird, spotted deer, Hanuman langur, and bluebill. Besides that, a huge number of livestock were also observed in and around vulture population. Or we can say vice versa. Wherever the dead animals are available to the vultures, their population is going to be survive there. And they are going to exist in that area. They are going to breed in that area. They are going to roost in that area. And that becomes their home range. So, as we talked about the 7 species, these birds, and we made a survey and we counted more than 7,500 vultures in different parts of Rajasthan. That includes white rum population. White rum are communal feeder. They usually feed in a group, as we saw in case of king vulture. They usually feed in isolation. So to understand their breeding site and nesting site, very simple tool is with us. With our cell phone, we have a Google Earth map. If we go to the Google Earth, you can locate that breeding site and you can observe that breeding site by feeding longitude and latitude. So this is the perennial river, Chambal, and you can see vultures nest and trees are around. So these are the trees all along the Chambal. These large trees are the breeding sites for white-rum vultures, nesting site and roosting site. So if you see in the image in the picture, you can see that this is the breeding colony. You can see these large nests over here of white-rum vultures. They are roosting over here. They are feeding on the ground. This is the colony of long-billed vulture resting on the ground after feeding. And these are the breeding areas. These are the nesting sites of long-billed vulture. They usually breed in the cliffs, but if the cliffs are not available and other sources and other factors are common there, for example, food and water is available in plenty, then they can breed on the khejri tree also. Khejri, which is also a state tree known as the Kalp Vraksh of Thar Desert. And they built their nest on the khejri as well, on the trees. Long-billed vulture usually settled in a undisturbed site, whether it is an old fort or ruined rocks, which has not been disturbed by the people. They always prefer that site for the roosting and for the breeding. Similarly, we have seen a large population of vulture all along the gorges of Chambal. Some of you might have been to Chambal, part of Uttar Pradesh, part of Madhya Pradesh, part of Rajasthan. And it is a huge long gauze. If you can see this aerial image of Google Earth, this starts from City Kota and goes up to Gaparnath. If you have been to there, this Gaparnath gauze, and this gauze is almost 200 meters wide and 300 meters depth. So, and these are cliffs where they build their nest. And this is the most safe breeding colony of long-billed vulture at present. Because no predator can approach on ground, no animal can move over there, no one can negate them, and they can breed safely and successfully over here. So these are some close-ups of these clips, how they build their nest and how they take care of chick in the breeding site. Similarly, Egyptian is spread throughout the Rajasthan, and their population can be seen near the large dumping grounds or the panchayats dumping ground, wherever the dead animal carcasses were disposed of by the local authorities. You can see them in thousands over there. They are very addictive. They can build their nests in the old buildings and havelis of Shekhawati or any other part of the country for that matter. They can build their nest on electric pole compared to the remaining vulture species, which are not so adaptive. They hardly breed on the electric poles. If we see, none of the species other than Egyptian have been reported that they build their nest on the buildings or on the electric poles. So we consider Egyptian vulture, the Nephron percentus, is the highly adaptive species, and that's the reason they are surviving the most. Red-headed vulture, usually we have seen in the isolation, and mostly we have been observing them in the protected areas or around the protected area, because they prefer the freshly killed carcasses. They hardly seen on the rotten carcasses to feeding upon. And these are some of the large migratory vultures population congregation in Thar Desert, that is including Bikaner, Nagaur, Jodhpur, Udaipur, Bardmer, Jaisalmer, and some part of Kota and Bundi district and Chittorgarh district. we have seen. And in isolation, some small population can be observed wherever the dead animals are. You can see them in Rajasthan, in Gujarat, in Madhya Pradesh. So these are the three main migratory species: Eurasian griffon, cinereous vulture, and Himalayan griffon. And if you go to any of the large dumping ground, you can see them in thousands. Although we are saying that vultures has been declined very fast, but at the same time, the thorough survey of the breeding area, thorough survey of the feeding grounds is not been under vigilance. So we don't have much of the data on their population and their feeding and their breeding biology. These are the carcass ground where you can see the migratory vultures together. And once you see them in air, you can circling without flapping their wings with the thermal of the air, and they can go up to the 200-meter, 500,000-meter high in the sky. These are the major vulture population sites. We have seen the common feeding grounds, recorded communal roosting sites, recorded breeding sites, and long-term monitoring sites. We have selected 24 for the different species. So food and feeding of vulture, largely you see the 78% is the livestock in their carcasses. So you must understand the cow is so important for the conservation of. If we talk about the religion and culture, that is a different political scenario. But if you talk on the ground reality, cow is the basic food, and these are taken care by the people, not by the forest department, because their 90% diet is on the domestic carcasses, and of which 78% is the cow carcasses. So we need to preserve, we need to conserve and manage the dumping yards on priority. So what kind of carcasses are coming there, whether they are infected, they have been treated with the contaminated drugs, and they comes to the carcass ground and they affect the life in air, that we need to understand. Similarly, the feeding sites of vultures, as we are talked, and then feeding species feeding together, they are communal feeder. All the species can feed together. Definitely, size is a matter. The dominant species come first, and the smaller in the size species come later on the ground. And there are very fatal encountered, the fatal fights of vultures of different species. These inter and intra specific interactions can be seen on the large dumping grounds anytime. So size definitely matter. The dominance hierarchy is almost dependent on the size. As we see the dominance rank, Himalayan griffon is the dominant one, and the size is definitely 115 to 125 centimeter wingspan, the body size. Smallest is the Egyptian vulture, so it comes to the food in the last. So these are the major roosting sites. They usually roost on the rocks, on high electric poles, on trees, and sometimes in the buildings, the ruined building or undisturbed buildings in the urban area. This image is of building is from IIM Ahmedabad. They are roosting on the IIM Ahmedabad within city. So their breeding behavior is as common as other birds. They soaring together, they close together, they mutually preen each other, and then mounting takes place as mounting in other birds. And after 45 days, it gives a single egg. Mostly long-billed and white-rump vultures give single. Egyptian has been seen sometimes twins. So after 45 days, the egg hatches and both parents taken care of the chick. And breeding behavior, if you can see the calendar, the egg laying start somewhere in January. And likewise, the incubation takes place, the brooding takes place, and parental care and the feeding, and then takeoff of the nest. So it is very common. The breeding season for the long-billed vulture started in October to February. One egg per year. It hatches in 42 to 46 days after incubation. After about 100 days parental care, the juvenile vultures are ready to fly. And if you talk about the sexes, very commonly the avian expert says the sexes are alike for male and female both. But if you observe bird very minutely, very closely, then you can see the bird with the large and black plumage is the female, because she move very less. She always be with the chick. Whereas male usually go outside the nesting site and bring food. So their wing color is bit faint, lighter in color. Their body size is bit smaller. So similarly, in all other raptors, the female's body size is bigger compared to the males. So we have been observing more than 279 eggs of long-billed vulture and 75 eggs of white-rumped vultures. And we have calculated the breeding success is about 61% and 41% for white-rumped vulture respectively. And this is included 29 rescued chicks. The breeding success otherwise go below 50%. With the help of rescue, the breeding percentage is up to 61%. So what happened when the juvenile first take off from the nesting site? It touches the ground. That is usual because this bird is huge. It's almost 5 to 6 kilograms during the juvenile phase. So when it take off, it takes some time. It touches to the ground, and within a day or two, it can take off. But meanwhile, there are so many changes on the ground. The feral dog population is very high in all the areas, whether it is protected area, around the protected areas, and in any of the community area, you can see dogs are in huge number in the country nowadays, even in the urban and rural equally. So they trap them, they kill them. So we rescued these chicks. And again, when we find any nest fallen chicks, we just bring them to the veterinary hospital, give them first aid, and then ship them to the zoo. And after 3 to 4 days taken care, and with the force feeding, initially you need to feed them because they're normally fed by the parents. So if you are not feeding them, they cannot eat their own. But after 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, regular force feeding, they start taking their own. So you need to feed them with the local available device. You can make it with a wooden chopstick and you can offer them food. And within 10 to 15 days, they are ready to take off. Their wingspan is full, their body growing well. But at the same time, when we bring some vultures on the rescue to the zoo, there is very limited space available in the zoos. So not more than 5, 6 vultures we can keep in the zoo. Then we proceed to the community. We put some cages with the community, and community start doing voluntarily this work, rescuing vultures, feeding them, and kept them in the cages to protect from the unnatural predation. And even if we don't have the cages, we can rescue them within the same tree from where they have fallen. We put them back to the nesting site and put a water pot over there to drinking and feed them morning and evening with the 2 to 300 gram meat. So how this threat come to the vultures? The first alarm in 2004 by Oakes Lindsay and his team that vulture population is declining. And there are various factors has been given, whether it is diclofenac contamination, it is a visceral gout, or it's a neck drooping syndrome, or bacterial disease, or pesticide. So this is all for one species. There are many threats to the life in the air, as we all know. But what kind of these infection and what kind of this toxicity comes, how this environment pollutant come to the vulture, that study has been conducted by so many scientists and various scientists. So the first paper published by Oakes Lindsay's team in January 2004, and paper was published in Nature, diclofenac residual as the cause of vulture population decline in Pakistan. At the same time, this was an experiment, and Oakes Lindsay gave almost 40 carcasses every day to the vultures. And that feed was artificially injected. The dead animals were injected with diclofenac to check their contamination. Similarly, the cattle drug killed thousands of vultures. So Government of India banned diclofenac drug for veterinary purposes in 2006. But even after banning, since it is very effective for the livestock and it is very cost effective, so people are still using published in 2016 Nature, and that is clearly that how this diclofenac is still observed over the cultures. Recently, in one study in 2018, the residual of diclofenac in tissues of vulture in India. Post scenario. So, if the government that means that it is not exposed to those animals. That is still there because a poor farmer is still, or livestock rearer or the pastoral they are still searching for the drugs. In absence of proper veterinary care, they can just use the human drugs and give it to the carcasses. And when the carcass dies, it exposed to the vultures, and diclofenac contamination straight go to the vulture or any other raptors feeding on those carcasses. Similarly, the pesticide residual in the tissue of egg of white rump vulture, Gyps bengalensis, has been reported in India. So, as many of the toxicologists, as Professor Mamta and their lab mate, they are working on the toxicology. It is a very important issue to understand how this contaminants affect in India, how they are affecting the alien science, how they are affecting the alien fauna, and particularly affecting the world as well. Definitely, there are some of the major contamination and recently some of them are also things. Bacterial infection also reported in the vultures, and malaria is also reported in the vulture population. So vulture population is increasing nowadays in some of the area where diclofenac ban has been effectively implemented by the states. And also they have been also preserving some of the natural sites of the vultures, and that makes vulture population very healthy in some of the part. For example, Chambal in Rajasthan and follow the range in Savai Madhopur area. The vulture population is increasing. Similarly, in part of UP and MP, around the Betwa River, in Orcha, in Katarnia Ghat, their population is still existing. In Bandhavgarh National Park, their population is surviving. In Khana, their population is surviving. In Manas, in Jim Corbett, we have seen that many of the migratory vultures are also breeding in those areas. So when we found any of the dead animals, we collect their tissue samples, and we saw many times they are suffering because of the hunger. They are not exposed. The chicks fallen from the nest are not exposed to the proper feed. Their parents cannot take up parental care because they have fallen in the Prosopis bush. If you can see these area, once any chick fallen in this Prosopis jungle, their parents cannot locate their chick and they cannot feed like how sparrow can go down and feed. But vulture is a large bird that needs almost 50 to 100 meter to take off, and their wingspan is almost 10 feet. So once they fallen over there, they just die, whether it is a unnatural predation or their natural death. So most of the dead carcasses we have been post-mortem and we have collected. You can see the kind of stomach content we find over there. The many of the bangles and the crockeries and glasses and whatnot. So captive breeding program has been introduced for the vultures by Government of India with the help of CZA and Bombay Naturalist Bombay Naturalist Society and RSPB. So I also be part of that, and I've been to Pinjore and I've seen the breeding areas. And after that, I get an opportunity to visit US, and we have seen and heard about the condor. I have not seen any condor bird before that during my 2007 visit. And I visited that Los Angeles Zoo, how the captive breeding programs are taken by the government of US. Earlier, there used to be 36 condor left. Then their senator says, why we are preserving these vultures or these condor, why we are spending this much of money and dollar, and they spending huge money. But one of the scientists advocated over there because they are dying of the human's error. Since we have been introduced a lead in the ecosystem, and that contamination kills them, and many of the egg cells are destroyed because of the pesticide and DDT. So Senate take a note that since it has been man-made mistake, so it is our duty to preserve that species and protect that species. So they started captive breeding program in US and in Los Angeles Zoo, in Catalina Island, in Ventura. There are mostly in Californian side, in West Coast, and they are releasing it over there. And now their number increased up to 450. But at the same time, they are in a position to spend huge money. Their budget is in crores of dollars, millions of dollars. We cannot afford that. And if a single condor missed, which are all satellite tagged, a helicopter go for the searching and find that this is okay, this is 500 kilometers away from their parental site. So that kind of monitoring is there. And during captive breeding, they are incubating them. You can see the incubation unit, the eggs have been properly taken care. and they hardly visit these birds manually. They're all in the black curtains and just watching these birds carefully. They are not disturbing them. They are watching on the computer monitors. And each bird in captivity has been tagged, wing tagged, लगे हुए हैं इन सब पे. And you can see their large cages over there, and their egg has been taken meticulously. When the shifts has been, the duties has been changed. They know where the head is, where the tail is of the bird. And with the help of X-ray, they can keep them in incubation units. So, and they also provide some artificial facilities, artificial nesting site as it is in the nature. They build such structures to allow these birds to breed upon. They give an artificial platform, the species which breeds in rocks and cliffs. They provided rock cliffs model over there. So it is Better Creek, which is a release site for the vultures. But end of the day, the final result was not as expected, because after 40 years, they are still feeding them on these dumping yards. They're feeding water, they are feeding food every day and morning and evening. So vultures are just waiting for the food. So this is not the aim of conservation. Once you lost a species, once you lost the ecosystem, it is very hard to recover. So we must preserve the natural habitat, the natural gene of any given species. Once they have been break, whether any of the environmental contamination or environment pollutant or any of the natural disaster, we need to handle these issues very carefully. Otherwise, after spending of crores of rupees, the species is still not fully introduced in wild. It still needs human assistance. They are still providing food and water them every day. So I have been to their breeding areas, their training centers, and we have bought some of the satellite transmitter to put on the long-billed and white-rump vultures over here. And they were sponsored by US Fish and Wildlife Service USA. And these transmitters have been used for researches, and we tried those transmitters to put on the back of the vulture, and that experiment was conducted in Jodhpur Zoo with the help of a US scholar, Jonathan Hall. He is my student during that time. He's doing his master's and then he did his PhD. So we have put at this satellite transmitter on the back with a Teflon belt, which is not harming bird, and we try to see how comfortable it is and how it is affecting the movement of this bird in captivity. So when we put this transmitter and release this bird in the zoo, it moves normally. It is not affecting their normal movement, their normal behavior, and they are normally works on that. But still, unfortunately, we are not getting permission to release them in the wild, or we are still waiting for the permission to put satellite transmitters on the vulture's back, whether it is long-billed or white-rump vulture. So we're waiting for the central government's permission. Then we are putting these transmitter back to the vultures in the wild, and we want to study their home ranges, which is not known to science. That's the situation. We are very much advanced in technology, but still we are not able to know the avian home ranges of Great Indian Bustard. For that matter, Great Indian Bustard has been taken up by the Wildlife Institute of India. And since last 3-4 years, they are working in Jaisalmer and Pokhran. They are put at some satellite transmitter. And then you find interesting things, how we are preserving Great Indian Bustard as our state bird of Rajasthan. We are spending crore of rupees to preserve them in captive breeding. But when we put satellite transmitter, we saw that these birds are moving towards Pakistan. And once they are named as Great Indian Bustard, so that name gives them a kind of rivalry, or what kind of psychological reactions, they kill them immediately. And as this species is protected in India, it is not well protected in the Wildlife Acts in Pakistan. Because this aerial distance is not more than 100 to 80 kilometers. And these birds frequently move to the Pakistan in the Sindh areas. And there are reports, there are papers published in Current Science that in Pakistan, many of the hunters from Gulf countries, many of the Sikhs, many of the rich people come, and they are allowing them to hunt bustards over there in Pakistan. So almost at one time, there was an article in Current Science in 2008, almost 40 vultures has been shot down by the hunters. That's the kind of situation on the ground. So until unless we don't know the home range, if we are preserving them in Indian side and they are moving towards Pakistan side, they have been killed. So all the exercise has been gone. So there need to be a bilateral dialogues in between both the countries and people who are working on the avian science. So we tested and tracked movement of these vultures with the satellites, and it works very well. So once we can satellite transmitter put it on the bird, that gives all kind of atmospheric data, the speed, the moisture, the temperature, the location, the GPS coordinate, height, all kind of physiographical and climatical data was recorded by these satellite transmitters. And they are very light in the weight. They are not more than 80 grams. So bird has no ill effect by these. And for that matter, we are here to make what we learn. We have to train some of the younger generation. We are taking regular field visits to the scholars in various vulture habitat areas and showing them and giving them training for days together, weeks together, how to preserve and monitor and observe these birds. And similarly, as I told in my earlier part of lecture, that we need to involve people because they have very crucial role. You can see in this image, they are the people who cleaning the dead cows after death. They are skinning the carcasses. They sold these skins to the market after processing, and that open carcass has been left for the vultures to feed. So if we educate these people that they should not harm the vultures, their nestings, their eggs. So that is the main thing, and that was the main reason we can rescued more than 50 vultures in last few years. So if captive breeding program is not yet come out in last 10 or 20 years with 10 birds or 20 birds to release in the wild, but our small team can rescue more than 50 long-billed and white-rump vulture. So rescue is an important tool to save the avian life, especially the endangered species. So we need a human assistance, regular monitoring to check all the breeding areas, and if there is any chip fallen from the nest, we must rescue and give them assistance and release them back in the same site. That kind of artificial assistance is needed to get their breeding success very high. So we also give the same training to the forest department people and the people who are involved in the research age of avian science. And I've been to US, and this is my talk on vultures in Smithsonian Institution, and top-notch scientists who working on the avian science, who is working on the air toxicology, and who working on the condor breeding centers. So that was all. So these are some of the publications on vultures by our team, just to share with you that whatever happens, you must observe minutely and then publish those issues, those things. So the younger generation and the coming scientists can work upon, they can find something. Thank you so much to you, all of you, for listening patiently. With some technicalities, I'm sorry I cannot visible to you all. I sincerely thank Government RR College, Autonomous College, Alwar, especially the organizing secretary, Professor Mamta Sharma, the veteran Professor Hukum Singh ji, and their all team to help us. And I'm thankful to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Maharaja Ganga Singh University, West Virginia University, USA, National Geography, who supported our many of the researches, US Fish and Wildlife Service, who supported us, the State Forest Department, Hadoti Natural History Society, the School of Desert Science. These are the voluntary organizations which helps us, and they provide us the resources as and when it is needed. And most importantly, the community and all of you as participants are more valuable for me, more valuable for all of us to share our knowledge with you. Thank you so much. Thank you.